Hey guys, it's Chris, and welcome back to the Smoke Break, episode 10, I believe. And today we're going to talk about just a couple things. This will be a little bit of a shorter episode, but I'll still chop a couple things up here into little clips as well. And there will be timestamps as well in the description below for the full episode for you guys who may just want to hear something on House of the Dragon but don't care about Marvel or vice versa. So anyway, today we're going to talk about a quick book update. We're going to talk about Black Widow, the latest Marvel movie. I've waited a couple days before I did a review on this. I did watch it the first night it came out. We'll talk about Black Widow. We'll talk about the Loki finale, as well as a quick little House of the Dragon news thing, couple of little news items, nothing major there, but we'll talk about that as well. So for those of you that are new here or hadn't been around in a while, I have written a book. It's called The Crimson Gods. It is my debut fantasy novel, and it will be out here in a couple months. So I have the cover finalized now. I can't wait to show you guys the actual cover and get the damn thing printed in my hand, which won't be too far away. Right now it is in interior formatting. So once they get the formatting done, I'll have a quick proofread over the whole thing, which includes formatting as well. So we're looking right now at a September or October release date to the public, and this will be available everywhere. So really looking forward to getting this out to the world, and I hope a lot of you guys enjoy it. So if you guys want updates on the Crimson Gods and other projects that are coming out in the land of Osgoth, this world I created, be sure to go to my website. That link will be in the description below, and sign up for our newsletter. I give all the updates there, as well as Patreon. So consider joining our Patreon community so we can keep this damn channel alive. And by the way, if any of you guys are here for the SmokeScreen podcast, I have started a new and separate podcast channel so we can try to get everything straight in the algorithm. And we have a new podcast coming out tomorrow as well, so feel free to subscribe to the new channel to support the SmokeScreen podcast. I will leave that link in the description below. I also wanted to mention I have joined the Editorial Freelancers Association and started taking some classes and doing some free developmental edits on Reddit, on the Fantasy Writers subreddit as well. I think I'm going to start doing some editing on the side as well. I really enjoy it. I think it's something I'll be decent at. I've been kind of diving into stories hardcore for 6 or 7 years now. Essentially, a developmental edit is really a big overview, a big picture. It's not to where you go in and change words necessarily. You just make suggestions on plot points, on structure, on narrative, potential plot holes, all that good stuff as well. So I think I'll start that up as well here very soon. So I'll leave that website link in the description below as well. So anyway, let's jump in and talk about Black Widow. So Black Widow, the latest Marvel movie, the beginning of Phase 4. I think a lot of people had quite a few problems with it, and I didn't love it as well. I didn't think it was horrible. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people are saying. But I think they could have done a lot better as far as sending Natasha Romanoff off in her essentially farewell, I believe, since she is technically dead in our timeline. But we'll get into more of that kind of stuff in talking about Loki. So most of Black Widow, of course, takes place before the events of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame and all that. It takes place right after Captain America Civil War. So this is that period where the Sokovia Accords are in effect, and she is basically on the run from the U.S. government, just like Steve Rogers as well. So we find out that she reconnected with her sister Yelena, and I thought she was great in the movie. I thought Natasha was great, and I thought everybody in it, did the best they could with the script. So I actually like the idea of her going back to explore her past and, get rid of the Red Room and basically the mind control of all these widows across the world. We saw flashbacks in several Marvel movies of her training back in the day, and I like the idea of her getting back at Dreykov, the main villain, and then you had Taskmaster, which was not really Taskmaster. And I think that's what most people have a problem with, is they deviated so much from the source material. And actually, I didn't remember the scene where Loki had talked to her during the first Avengers movie, where he was in his cell and she was saying she had red on her ledger and she's trying to get rid of it and all this kind of stuff. And he actually brought up the fact that she killed his daughter, the main villain in this movie. So although I do remember that scene and her tricking Loki and all that stuff about what he really wants, so that was actually kind of the setup, I'm sure, for, going back and exploring her past. But what I liked about the old, as far as the flashbacks and her training and stuff like that, was it was an old school Russian thing that happened during the Cold War. And this was a very real thing, by the way. You had entire towns in the U.S. that were made up of Russian spies. Russia would have training in Russia where they would set up entire towns to mimic the U.S., and they would learn our accents and all that kind of stuff as well to come over and spy during the Cold War. So although this is obviously a Marvel movie and, didn't have the Red Room necessarily in the whole Black Widow program, they had stuff very similar. So it's really cool that it's based off some reality, because we do want, reality-based Marvel movies, in my opinion. But I think that's where it kind of gets over the top here in this movie, where now the Red Room is this floating city in the clouds, and I didn't like that at all. Not that they can't update their technology, but I didn't like the idea of it being, this floating cloud city where this, kind of regular old dude has mind control with pheromone technology, where somebody can come in the room with him and they're not allowed to touch him or hurt him in any way because of pheromones. And she ended up having to break her own damn nose and sever the nerve in order to actually hurt him in some way or kill him, which was her goal in the first place. So I guess during the rest of the movies, during the whole entire Avengers series, that, she couldn't smell a damn thing because her nerve had been severed. Her sister, Yelena, she'll definitely be a staple in the upcoming Marvel movies. She's going to be in Hawkeye, I believe. That's been confirmed. We'll talk about that in just a second with the kind of odd, weird post-credit scene, so we'll get into that as well. But she's going to be probably essentially the next Black Widow. She'll essentially take her place, is what it's going to look like. What they're doing is in all these movies and TV shows, they're really setting up the young Avengers and all that kind of stuff as well. Kind of the next generation of Avengers, which, I think they should go in that direction, just like in the comics. Eventually all these people have to kind of go away. Everybody's not a god like Thor who lives thousands and thousands of years or whatever, so I understand where they're going with that, and that's totally fine, and I think she'll be good there. But I think she kind of stole the show in this movie as opposed to kind of focusing on Natasha. I mean, I like them both. They did fine as far as what they had, but I just didn't like the overall movie. Taskmaster was not Taskmaster. It was really weird. It wasn't a really good representation of that villain at all. That could have been done a lot better. The just kind of general plot points are kind of dumb in general. You go to break out the Red Guardian in prison, and if he could get out that easy, not that it was, super easy, they expected him to go through all these people armed and all this kind of shit and then jump up on this helicopter. Why was he in prison in the first place? He tried to be the comic relief character, and we just never got to see him do anything. We got to see him put on his uniform, and he's bragging about being the Red Guardian and all this kind of stuff. Basically the alter ego to Captain America as far as the Russian version back in those days. And we didn't even get to see him fight. Every time we started to get in a fight with him, for example, him and Taskmaster, it would just cut away and we'd see other shit. So didn't really even use him properly. And of course, that was the whole plot, was getting this red goo, this red serum or whatever to release all the Black Widows from their spells. So that whole thing was kind of weird. It was just kind of odd. So I just think they fell short. And then you had this weird post-credit scene that I mentioned where it's now current day after Endgame, where Natasha is now dead, because of going to Vormir and getting the Soul Stone and that whole thing with Hawkeye. So apparently she had this makeshift grave, and her sister shows up. She now has a dog. But then Val shows up, and if you remember Val, she showed up in Falcon and Winter Soldier. She was the one who basically recruited John Walker to be the U.S. agent after he no longer was Captain America. After Sam came and took the shield back and became Captain America himself, he is now the U.S. agent, so we'll see him going forward somewhere as well. But it was just odd for her to have inside information about saying that Hawkeye's responsible for Natasha's death, when we all know that's not what happened. And of course, that means that Val has some inside information about what went down on Vormir. And nobody should know that but the inner circle of Avengers. So I'm not really sure how they're going to explain that one. But she is going to be in Hawkeye, and I suppose that maybe they'll work things out in that show or whatever as he trains his new apprentice to take over the helm. But, Marvel movies to me are like, sex and pizza. Even when they're bad, they're still pretty good. So it was okay. Could have been better. I just felt like Natasha, being Black Widow, one of the main characters, that I think most people really enjoy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, could have been given a better send-off overall, because it just kind of felt like a rush, forced. And I know it's a Marvel movie. We're talking about superhero stuff and space magic, but some things have to be grounded in reality, and nobody ever gets a broken bone, and they try to kind of overdo it with comedy this time. And although I generally enjoy most of the Marvel comedy, they're getting to the point where they start to overdo it, and they start to kind of save everything. You can't really have a dramatic moment because they try to break it up with comedy when you kind of need that drama sometimes. You had a perfectly good opportunities in there between her and her sister where it ended up being some kind of comic relief instead of having a real dramatic moment, if that makes any sense. So you can let me know in the comments as well. Did you enjoy Black Widow? Did you hate it? Did you think it was okay like me? Let me know what you think in the comments about the beginning of Phase 4. All right, so let's talk about Loki Episode 6 and Loki in general. Overall, I really enjoyed Loki, the show, the series. But one thing I don't like is multiverse bullshit. This is something I've had an issue with for years and years and years, not just in Marvel, but multiverses and alternate realities in general, because I think it's a cop-out. I think it takes away from any real drama in our real world. But as far as Episode 6 goes, you did have Kang the Conqueror. We actually got one right. Kang showed up, the Kang the Conqueror. This was a very nice version of King the Conqueror. We'll see, I guess, the badass version of King the Conqueror, I believe, in Ant-Man and Wasp, since it's confirmed that he has been cast in that movie. Maybe even Doctor Strange. We'll see where that goes as well in the multiverse of madness. So it looks like Kang is going to be kind of the big next level MCU villain. And for me, I like Kang the character. I like Kang the Conqueror as a character, as a villain in MCU, but I don't like the multiverse stuff. So the episode itself was fine. I mean, they went through this, magical portal at the end of time or whatever. And I really wanted them to end up in the quantum realm because this would have kept things separate where you could still have all this stuff and have fun with different universes or different realms or whatever, but not really affect the main timeline that we're dealing with in the MCU. But they go through the portal. They find this little mansion where Kang's hanging out by himself at the end of time, and he knows everything that's going to happen. He was kind of the weird, quirky Kang. This is obviously a variant like he mentioned himself. And then it gets to a point where he no longer knows what's going to happen. That was the threshold he was talking about. And you had Lady Loki, Sylvie try to kill him. Then you had Loki trying to say, I don't know, maybe it's better if we do just keep him alive that way, because listen to what he's saying. If you kill him, you're going to have all these horrible things happen. The episode itself was kind of boring, actually, because he just sat there literally and talked and spilled the beans on the whole thing. And I really enjoyed the theory and kind of went along with the theory that it was going to be in the quantum realm that we saw in Ant-Man, which would obviously fit into the next one being Kang the Conqueror, being the villain. But he didn't say that. So as of right now, it looks like there are actually just multiple universes and timelines where these different variants of different people. And that's what I mean about the whole multiverse thing. It takes away from the main timeline. You have a place somewhere, wherever it exists, outside of time, where Kang is hanging out in his little mansion, and Infinity Stones and all that stuff don't mean a damn thing there. Magic, none of the shit that we care about in Marvel means anything. And that means that death has no real meaning. People don't have free will. Everything's pre-written or whatever, because otherwise the TVA swoops in and changes everything or whatever. So although you can still kind of just focus on our main timeline, you know that Loki's out there somewhere from the movie in another reality now, in another timeline, still alive, when in our timeline, of course, he ended up dead in Endgame. So just that whole concept of, well, they can always kind of bring somebody back, or they can always bring somebody over from, this other reality. They could do the mutants this way and completely ignore the source material and just bring in mutants from another universe where they already exist. For example, instead of having Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch, find out that her father's Magneto, they could just bring Magneto in from another reality somewhere and bring in the mutants that way. And I don't like all that stuff. This is the same reason I only watched the first Star Trek movie that J.J. Abrams did, because, again, I mentioned this before, because they destroyed Vulcan, and not to get into the whole Star Trek thing, but when they destroyed Vulcan, that basically destroyed every show that you'd ever enjoyed about Star Trek, all the way from the original series to the Next Generation to Deep Space Nine. None of that even mattered, because destroying Vulcan would have ripple effects that would screw up all those shows, and these people would never even exist, half of these people. And I know that's not how time works in the MCU, but I'm just saying it makes it feel pointless when they say, oh, it's just an alternate reality. That's not the real Captain Kirk, and that's why I didn't want to see it. I didn't give a shit about the other Captain Kirk and the other reality. I wanted to see the Captain Kirk that I grew up loving and seeing his past and what he went through in Starfleet and all that kind of stuff. And the same goes for the MCU. I don't want to see this to get so convoluted to where we can start bringing in all these different people. Nobody really dies because even though it's a variant and somebody, for example, like Black Widow, she's dead, they can now bring in a Scarlett Johansson from another universe, and she's almost the same as herself, just not quite the same, don't have the same memories, where she could quickly learn where she fits in this world and just simply decide to stay and rejoin the Avengers. And I don't like that. Although I'd love for her to be back, and I hate him when she died, that's what has the impact of her death, is knowing that she's really gone. So overall, I did really enjoy Loki. With that, all that said about the multiverse stuff, I did enjoy Loki, the show. They did confirm season 2. They said that Loki will return in season 2. So this is the first Marvel show where they're actually going to have multiple seasons, apparently. So maybe they can still confirm that this does take place in the quantum realm, which would be okay in my opinion. I think with the quantum realm, you could have all this kind of weird shit going on, and it doesn't affect our main timeline in MCU as far as all these multiverses where shit don't really matter. And last but not least, really quick House of the Dragon news. This is going to be very, very quick. Apparently filming was paused for a couple days due to another COVID case. And I'm so over this bullshit. I'm just tired of it. But it's just for a couple days, and so they'll be right back on track apparently in just a couple days. And with all the prequel shows that were in development, they did cancel one. They were working on about 5 or 6 of these or whatever it's going to be, trying to build this kind of like almost like an MCU for A Song of Ice and Fire, this Song of Ice and Fire cinematic universe over at HBO. And they had a show that we were calling Flea Bottom they had in development. They have canceled that now, so that will no longer be a show. And this is going to take place in Flea Bottom, King's Landing. And I think kind of show the perspective of common folk and all that kind of shit. And I don't know exactly what era it was going to be in, so who was going to be king or whatever. We didn't really get that information. But that now has been canceled. But they are still going forward with, I believe, 10,000 ships, which is a story of Nymeria coming over and conquering Dorne. So that would really be a good show. So I think they'll stick with 10,000 Ships, obviously House of the Dragon, and I think eventually we'll get stuff like Robert's Rebellion as well. So they're trying to build this, Game of Thrones cinematic universe, and we'll see what they do. But as of now, Flea Bottom is no longer a thing. Anyway, guys, as usual, let me know what you think in the comments below about Loki, Black Widow, House of the Dragon. And if you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share. And of course, be sure to subscribe to get everything and click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.